Hello, my name's Kevin Monk. I'm the Managing Director of SAR JV. Now, this is just a quick video about ESR Wrapper. It's a project we've been working on. It is funded by NHS Improvement, and it's about the electronic staff record project. Now, the first thing I want to note is that this is not a sales video. We're not trying to pitch you anything. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're not trying to get you to buy one of our products. It's a project that we've been working on that I think, and the rest of the team thinks, is really important to the NHS and could really, really change things. And so the reason for this video is to try and get other people, other communities, NHSX, NHSE, NHSI, NHS trusts, data nerds, people who go to hackathons, anyone who's interested in making the NHS work better and making tech in the NHS work better, trying to get them involved in this project and becoming a part of it. So it's not a sales pitch video. I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. It's actually public money, public code. It's owned by you, and we're interested in you guys and anybody else who's interested in ESR and coming on board and getting involved in this project. So, very quickly, what is ESR? Let's just quickly run over what it's about. It's the electronic staff record system. It's used at a national level by everybody in the NHS. It's 1.5 million people. It has all sorts of information on there about pay grades, leave, first name, last name, gender, national insurance numbers, payroll information, which departments you work in. So it's a really, really important source of information throughout the NHS. And we've put this picture of this apple tree here, partly to sort of show the abundance of data and the amount of data that's on ESR. It is laden, absolutely laden with data fruit, things that you would love to pluck off that tree and use and utilize in our projects. The problem is that it's not so easy to do that. And so this is a video about our project, the ESR Wrapper project, or your project, the ESR Wrapper project, and what we're trying to do to try and unlock that information and allow it to be used through all through the NHS. And I really think that it can make a massive difference to the everyday working. So let's explain a few things about why this data tree is quite hard to eat the data from. Once upon a time, let me take you back. I was working in an NHS trust here, and there was somebody who was working on a system here who will remain nameless because you'll find it out in a while. But they were working on a system where they had to pull information into a database here. So this is a database. They were pushing information into this database, and my job was to turn up there and speak to this person here and find out what the system was and how we could replace it, or if we needed to replace it. So I started asking them what they did with the data. So this person every day would take information and put it into the system. And I said, well, what point do you take the information out? When do you start taking information back the other way? They said, well, I don't really. I just put the data into the system. I don't ever take any of the information back out. And I thought, well, that's kind of curious. I said, well, does anybody else log into this system? Does anyone else have a login at all? And they said, no, nobody else logs into the system. There's literally just me. There's nobody else involved in this system. I thought, well, maybe you read information off the screen and then you take it around here and you give it to the board, or you give it to an executive team, and then they use this information. Or maybe there's somebody hanging off of a system here, and they're taking information directly from the database, and you're just unaware of it. Now, I kind of hope this one was true. I don't think it was. I think this person was diligently going in every day, putting information into this database system. And it was very accurate data. I mean, it had all of the information that you would need on that system. And they were very good at their job. But this was just a huge data silo. There was information going into the system, but nothing was coming back out of it. Yeah, so it's not great. The point I'm trying to make is that data is really only useful when you put it to work. You, it's a little bit like money. There's this idea that you just shouldn't just stuff money under your mattress. Money is only really useful when you're spending it or investing in a business or building a factory or building a hospital. Sticking it in the bank and leaving it there. Well, they don't leave it there. In fact, that's where the whole banking system comes from. They take your money and they lend it out to other people and they put your money to work. And it's the same with data. If you just store data in one central place and you never use it and you never utilize it, you can end up with these sort of scenarios where someone just pulls in information. It's very accurate, it's very precise. It's considered the central repository of all that data. But if nobody can get information back out of it in order to make decisions, which is the whole purpose of a database, is the arrows going back this way and information coming back from the system to people so that they can start making good choices about how to proceed with a new facility in a hospital, or who they need to hire, or who's got coronavirus and is off sick at the moment. All of this information in here is very helpful for these people outside of here to make decisions. And so we should never just keep a pure database without making access to it. And that's the point really that I want to make, is that this wealthy tree of data in ESR is not really being utilized to its full potential, and it really should do. It really could make a massive difference to all the systems that are adjacent to it. So how does ESR fit? Well, thankfully, it's not quite as drastic as this example from 15 years ago, but it's not far away from it, unfortunately. There are a number of users, which is good. So there's more than one person, so we like that. And by and large, they're putting information back in and out of those systems. But this is only one way of accessing this information. It's far more important, really, that in order to unlock this information and make it useful to other groups, that this information is able to be accessed by other systems that have their own users attached to it. So we often get asked at SARD, do you connect to ESR? And the reason that they want to know that is because they want to make sure that the staff details on our system match the staff details on ESR. So if someone changes their name on the ESR system, does that mean that it then gets updated here? It's also really helpful to us, because if we're starting with a new trust or we're implementing our new system somewhere, then it's really helpful if we have detailed information about who's in the staff record system so that we can quickly get our system up and running. It also feeds into e-rostering, e-leave, appraisal data. There's a lot of other information that we want to feed back here. We have a lot of job planning data in our job planning system that needs to go back into Model Hospital. Currently, the only way to do that is for these users here who have a login to this front end system here, the www. They're the only way to get that information back into that system. And we'd really like it if you could get that information into the system via what is called an API. So what's the difference between an API and an and a www, a website, well, actually, it's not as big a difference as you might think. If you're concerned about APIs, or you think that there's some sort of technical, some clever technical thing that's really complicated and difficult to understand, that's not the case. So if we take ESR as an example here, how a user normally accesses this data and gets to it, this is the website route, is that they go to the My ESR website. So they'll go to the My ESR website here, and they'll take their username and password and they'll log in, and they'll access the system through My ESR. An API system is actually not dissimilar in any way. A computer can't. A computer can't. A computer can't put details in here. Well, actually, it can, but it's generally frowned upon. This is why sometimes when you go to a website, it asks you if you're a robot, because you can actually get computers to control websites and go in and grab the data that way. But it's not really the standard route for getting information out of a database for another system. And so the system that is used by other machines trying to get the data from another machine is through a system called an API. Now the API is really as simple as a website that returns text. It returns text in a very definite format, or it should do, because the computer needs to know what information is coming back and what it looks like, what shape it's got, what fields are coming back from that information. So it's very, very detailed, but actually it's just a big string of text. And I can show you that here if I go to these websites. So actually, let me show. So APIs are actually fairly common, and there's thousands of them out there that can be used for all sorts of different purposes. It's interesting to note that actually, if Dr. Banner worked for the NHS, it would be harder to get his career history than it is because he works for Marvel Comics. What do I mean by that? Well, if you go to Marvel Comics, they have an API for Marvel. This is going to take a long time to load up. Here is the API for Marvel Comics. So it's fairly simple. If I go here, this is the documentation. So this is written for humans, because ultimately humans are the people that have to tell the machines how to access this information. So it's very well documented, and it tells you all the different ways you can access that information. And you would go here, and then you could say name starts with Bruce. Okay, and then I can try it out here, and sure enough, it comes back with this text. So this is just a normal website. In fact, if I copy that and just paste it in here, into the URL. Oh no, didn't like that. Let's see if there's another way I can show the information coming back. This data just comes back from the API, and you can see all of the information about the comics they've been in. So there've been 126 comics. You can see lots of other results of the series that they've been in, stories that they've been in, events that have happened related to Dr. Banner. So there's lots and lots of information on here about Dr. Banner. Unfortunately, if he was in the NHS, you wouldn't be able to retrieve any of this information because whilst there's some amount of an interface with ESR, it's not of the same quality and the same level of documentation as the Marvel API or many other APIs out there. Just to give you a flavor of how many there are, if I just put fun APIs in here and search for it, there's a whole list of different APIs that you can use. Chuck Norris Facts, Pokemon API, International Space Station API, maybe an app tracking the ISS is what you need in your portfolio. The Star Wars API, Music Mix, Fun Translation, Brewery DB, Rest Countries, Tronal Dump. There are so many different. Oh, there you go. They've brought up Marvel as well. Cat Facts. There's even one about, where is it? Brewery DB. It's all different beers that you could possibly buy. And as it says here, don't build your own product database. Use Brewery DB to power your next innovative app. So if you were making an application that involved beer, why go off and accumulate all of this data yourself? Just they've done it for you. They've got that tree of information, and you could just grab the information that they've got and make use of it. So that's roughly what an API is compared to just a normal website. It's just a place where a computer can access a set of text in a very documented format. How does that fit into the wrapper that we're building? Well, so how does it currently work with ESR? What's the current format for ESR? Well, there is a sort of interface for ESR. Yeah, what they do is they take the information that's in this database and they place it into a CSV file over here. By CSV file, I just mean a demonstration effect. Pen's running out. So ESR will take data and they'll push it into this file. This is called an FTP server. So it's just a server where you can put files, and they will put essentially what is an Excel file up here. They document that file over here. So if I show you, this is documentation for that file. This is the electronic staff record program, National Health Service, generic outbound interface data sets. This generic data warehouse interface. It's a long document talking about how you can connect to that information in that FTP server. And the way it works is it will grab a set of changes that have happened on the database. So it's not, you couldn't, for example, query it like that Dr. Banner query. You can't just go and query the data directly. What will happen is every night there's some information that comes from ESR is put onto this FTP server, and it is only generally day to day, it is only the changes that have happened since the day before. So if Dr. Banner changed his name from Bruce to Bob, then that would come up on that night that changed. Then you'd see a change happen there, and it would say Bruce Banner is now Bob Banner, and it would go through into here, and it could be picked up. But the interface for this, the documentation for this interface is incredibly complex. It's written in this Word document or PDF document, and anybody who wants to access that data has to read through all of this information, trying to interpret it, trying to understand how that information comes out, and how you get there. It's not really a modern API interface, and ESR admit as much when I've spoken to some of their integrations team there. They said it's not really an API as you would consider a modern API to be. It's an interface. It's not really an easy to access interface. It's not particularly well documented, and so it's not very easy to get any of that information out. So what we've done is say, look, there's another way to do this. And what we've done is to say, okay, here's ESR, here's the FTP server, and here's the CSV document. What we'll do is we'll build a wrapper project. So what this is an application that sits around this, and it will worry about getting the information out of here. So only we need to read this document. Only we need to understand all of the small details of the interface to ESR and what's changing here. And then what we'll do is we'll provide an API that's that conforms to modern standards. We'll provide an API that has documentation. It will be owned by the NHS, so well, it'll be owned by anybody, but particularly the NHS, because obviously any NHS trust can use that information. We'll worry about the authorization and authentication. One of the interesting things about this data is that it's full up with very private information too. I mean, it has your national insurance number on there. I think it has some sexuality data. It has things that you perhaps really should be very careful not to leak out to people who don't need them. One of the things about building a modern API is that you can scope this, particularly for us at SARD, where the information that we want out of the system is first name, last name, location, probably what directorate you sit in, that sort of low-level information. And so we could actually scope our access to the system, or scope the access of similar companies that need similar levels of information, and say, well, if you access this API, you're not going to get any of that information back. You're not going to get any more information really than you need, which is good GDPR practice. You would have noticed that if you install an app via Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or one of the big social networks, one of the things that when you authorize that app is it says this will supply, Facebook will supply your first name, last name, email, perhaps your friends list, but generally it's quite a short list of things. And those companies, whilst they've obviously got a lot of data problems, they're quite careful about limiting what data goes outside of their API these days in a way that they weren't in the past. So you can really make sure that the information that's coming out of ESR is very narrow, and only the information that you really need in order to run your own systems. It's all on open source, so it's on GitHub. This is where we put the code, so anybody can access that information and that code. They can build on it, they can implement it, they can go out and build their own version of the system. We use two common standards. One's called Swagger and one's called JSON API. So this is how you document the code, and this is the particular format that the information comes back in. It's open source licensed, so it's an MIT license, so you can use it for commercial purposes as long as you attribute it back to the main project. It's built in Ruby, which is a common open source language. Quite a number of the largest companies in the world have started off with a Ruby stack. In fact, Twitter itself was built on Ruby originally. It's a fairly easy language to understand, and yeah, there's quite an abundant supply of developers able to read and understand this code. So that's the concept, is that we wrap this slightly archaic. I don't want to be too critical because it was built at a certain time, and it's understandable that it's perhaps not up to the modern standards that you can supply in the ESR Wrapper project. The other thing is that if there are systems that are accessing this data here, they can continue to do so. This doesn't get in the way. If someone's interpreted this standard directly and they've got their own NHS internal system, they can carry on doing so. All this does is make it much easier to run your own internal systems directly with the wrapper and have other companies. So this could be controlled by the NHS Trust, and they can say, oh, we've got a rostering company, or we've got an appraisal company, or we've got a job planning company, or a learning management system, or perhaps you have a sudden need to build a in-house coronavirus app where you want to track which staff members have got a coronavirus, or maybe you need to very quickly build a bed management system, and you need some info out of here about what locations are where and who works in what location. Then it makes it much easier, much quicker to rapidly build those sorts of apps. That's the concept. Who do we want to be involved in this? Well, this is public money, public code. As I said at the start, it's not a sales pitch. I'm not trying to flog this to anybody. It's for ESR employees. So if you work for ESR, we're really interested in getting your take on this. We really would like you to get involved. Going back to here, I mean, the idea of this wrapper around the edge, I know that there are ambitions to produce an API within the ESR team itself. So it may be that this just helps prototype that it becomes a starting point, and this circle can be expanded, and this whole wrapper project could be removed if it's implementing the same API as this here. It could just perhaps show a path forward and be a seed for the ESR's own work on an API. So we'd really love, if you work for ESR, you're an employee of ESR, we'd really love you to get involved in this project. We'd love anyone within the NHS alphabet to help adopt this and take it forward. So NHS Improvement, NHS England, NHS Digital, NHSX, NHSP, NHS Trust. If you're in HR, informatics, doctors, nurses, IT, in-house, devs, we really want you to get involved in this project. We can add you as collaborators on GitHub. We'd love you to submit pull requests. We'd love to work with you to try and install this wrapper application within your trust so that it makes it much easier for people to grab this data. It's open public sector code, so hackers, NHS lovers, GovCamp people, anyone who goes to sort of hackathon events, more than welcome to get involved, and even our competitors. So this is a system that will benefit all of us, and I mean that in a broader sense of the whole country. This, as we said right back at the start, this is an amazing resource of data. There's so much information in the ESR system, that if you can unlock it and allow people to produce all sorts of applications that sit around this data safely and securely, then it's going to have a dramatic effect on the ability of the NHS to run smoothly. So please get involved and please get in contact. Thanks.